Hi Michael, I am recording your feedback video for your problem solution paper. I know you said this was your final paper, but I'm still going to give feedback on it. If hopefully it'll allow you to do some revisions on this, and then my goal is also to kind of help you with other papers you'll write and other courses. So I'll be doing a little bit of APA help for you, and then also kind of talking about this paper in terms of like the large scale kind of assignment criteria. So it's basically like how you're approaching the problem solution paper and in respect to the assignment criteria for that paper. So you chose the topic of spaying and neutering, which is totally fine. I'm going to start with APA and give you some examples because I want to, as I was reading through this, there's, I noticed that you have in-text citations here, but it's a little confusing because you label them as 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what I'm going to, so I don't know what that means, but I'm going to pretend that 1 is this. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to pretend it is, because then I'm just going to do it for the 1. But since you have all, it looks like website sources, and I'm not sure if this is its own source either. If so, more information is needed for that citation, or I don't know if this is the URL for this source. But I'm going to show you how to do an APA citations because you've just given the URLs, which is not how you want to do your references page. But so I'm going to do that 1 citation and then show you how an in-text citation would look for this before I get into your paper. So I'm going to do that first. So I opened up that first source, which is the ASPCA, this one. At least that was the URL you had there. And then I opened up the OWL at Purdue. I just Google APA OWL. OWL stands for Online Writing Lab, and this is considered the next best thing to the manual. And then what I did is I clicked on electronic sources, and this tells you how to cite for things like websites, right, web pages. So on this particular source, the first, you want to look for the first 2 major things, which are, is there an author, and then what's the title, right? So we have the title here, the cost savings from publicly funded spay-neuter programs. There's no author. I didn't see one. Sometimes an author is listed at the end of an article, but there is none here. So we're going to presume there's no author. We also want to know the publishers, obviously the ASPCA, and then the date. When the date you get from websites is always at the bottom, it's always their copyright, unless there's a specific date for the article itself. And in that case, they might say it up here, like written on, April 20th, 2016. But this doesn't have that. So when an article online or information online on a web page doesn't have a specific date attached to it, you use the copyright date on the bottom of the website, which here is 2019. So then what we're going to do is you're going to look at, you're going to be using this one. If there's no author, you start with the title. So we're going to first start with the title, which is cost savings from publicly funded spay-neuter programs. So, and when you do a references page, whoops. And I'm going to also change all your font to Times New Roman size 12. And I'm also going to want to make sure your spacing is uniform. Okay. Alright, so, and that was cost Now I've forgotten the title. That happens all the time. Cost savings from publicly funded spay-neuter programs. So that's the title. And I always go back and look at the formula from APA. So we have the title, and then we'll put 2019 for here, and then you just need retrieved from, and then you put the URL. Okay. You can see the web pages for ones who have authors up here. You can see they start with the author, then the year, then the title, and then retrieved from. So you're just adding that author. But if there's no author, then you go straight to the title. And then it's from this. Then we're going to make that all the same color, which I can't, which is fine. If you can't, you can't. And then you want that hanging indentation, so that's what that would look like. So that is what, pretty easy for that one. I'll go ahead and do one more just because that did not take me that long. So let me go ahead and open up this one. Okay, so this is from the American Veterinary Medical Association, and okay, yeah, this is their source, but we're not going to use their source because they're publishing it on their page. So the title is U.S. Pet Ownership Statistics. There's no author, and then we have 2019. But I think saying 2012 because the source was, the information they're printing is from 2012. So U.S. Pet Ownership Statistics, and I'll change that underlining in a second. We don't want anything underlined. There we go. And then we could just put that. Oops. And to get that hanging indentation, that's what that would look like. So that's that. So then you would just need to do that for the remainder of your citations, and just making sure that it's alphabetized as well. So right now it's alphabetized because it's C and then U. So that's how you would do the why is that still underlined? Okay, that purple one doesn't want to change, but that's fine. Sorry, I am still sick. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what, like, how you do citations. Website citations are actually, I think, the easiest because they require, it's basically just like author, title, year, retrieved from, here's the URL. So it's a pretty basic formula. When you get into like scholarly articles or government documents, those always are much more complicated to cite. So if for some reason, if we go back up to your this paragraph where you have these 1, 2, and 3, I'm just going to presume that that one, and I could be wrong, so you'll have to fix it if I'm not right. I'm going to presume that it's this one because that was the first one listed. So when we do in-text citations, if we go back here, APA, or excuse me, yeah, the OWL APA at the OWL demonstrates how to do those in-text citations. So I don't want the basics though. I mean, that would probably be fine. But here, right, it says here's how you do it when you have an author, if you have this many authors. And I'm trying to find the one where it says, that's not that, that's not that. Here we go. And this is it here. So if no author or date is given, use the title in your signal phrase or the first word or two of the title in the parentheses and use the abbreviation n.d. for no date. So we've got a date for that first one. So, and this just means you want to shorten the title. So we can just use cost savings. So if we go back up here, this would be, you'd want a space there. Oops, and that goes in. And that's how the in-text citation would look. You would put the, and this is where APA can get confusing because in the in-text citation, the title goes in quotation marks, but on the references page, there are no quotation marks. So it's not always exactly the same, but that's how you would do the in-text citation for that. And I'll just assume that number 2, just for the sake of showing you, is number 2 on here, U.S. pet ownership. So, and that was 2012, and that would be, for that one I would do 3 words. Oops, like that. So that's how you would do that in-text citation. So I just wanted to give you some information on that because you need that for this paper, but you're also going to need it when you're asked to write other papers in other courses at Embry-Riddle because they almost all use APA. Pretty much like 98% of the courses use APA. Okay. So another APA note, and I changed your spacing, which is why this has been bumped down. For your headers, you need to, you've got different first page selected, which is perfect. You're just missing the running head there on the cover page. That only goes on the cover page. You have your title in all caps. Everything's in Times New Roman, so that looks good. The title here does not need to be in all caps. So it would go like that. And then I'm going to copy this because we do restate the title before the actual essay itself. Okay. I don't know why it's doing that. There we go. Okay, and this one's not quite. I'm just going to redo this because it was not on the same line. And then we'll move that over. Okay, so then your other headers will be nice and pretty. So that's kind of the APA layout that we've got. Didn't take me too long. I don't know if that was like 7 or 8 minutes, however long where we are in the video right now. Okay. So I read briefly through your paper. I'm going to talk about your introduction first. What I recommend right away is that you take that second paragraph and make it your first, and then combine those 2 paragraphs to make a overall introduction, because and that's underlined because you need the proper verb there. Right, this needs capitalized. It just needs a lot of polish in terms of not just the APA, but then the sentence level as well. So if there are an estimated 78 million dog, blah, 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 cats owned in the United States, and instead of saying that, you would say, you can just use a gerund, an ing verb, meaning that this many households in America have pets. Citation, right, with the average income in the U.S., an estimated blah, 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 and the average cost for the first year cost of owning a dog is blah, 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 and for a cat, it's blah, 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 right, and that's a fragment. So that's going to need, this is just spelled wrong, because you need significant. So I know what you're saying here, but it just needs, because you say the average income, because you're giving the average income in the U.S. at $60,000. That feels higher than what it actually is. I feel like it's much lower than that. And then you give the average first year cost of owning a dog is that much, and for a cat it's that much. You've got a period here you don't need, but and those feel quite low. It's because I have 2 cats that are almost 2 years old, and it's been expensive. So I think what you're trying to say is that based on the average income, like these first year costs are a significant amount of the average income in the for the average American income. But what is not shown is that, so for example, like I don't know what the percentage of that is. So it's like I were budgeting, which I'm not good at math, so I would probably ask my dad how to do this, but if it's, say we round up to $1,300, what's the percentage of that for a $60,000 a year income? Like, is it a 0.2%? Is it 10? I know it's not 10%, right? But is it 0.5%? So you would want to say something like, I would actually just start this sentence with the and just give all those statistics, and then say, like, according to these numbers, yeah, I think demonstrates is fine. This demonstrates that owning a dog or cat for the average American would cost them X percentage of the average income, or maybe just say of their income, of their annual income. So we want that information of like, okay, but how much is that? Because like when I look at those numbers, like $60,000, I'm like, okay, $1,200 a year for a dog is not that much money. So my initial response, like, to those numbers is that they're not significant, or they're not statistically significant. So you would need to demonstrate like that's an actual like extensive cost. And then you would get rid of that sentence there. And then from there, because what I've done is I've joined those 2 first paragraphs, I would need to, or you would need to, go through and make sure everything makes sense. So from where I would go from here is straight into the spay and neuter. And you might say something like, these first year dog and cat ownership costs include the cost of spaying and neutering, and then you would want to use this information here. So I would take that out, because then we want the costs for that right away. right, which would be anywhere from $100 to $500 depending on size and type of animal, right? And then your in-text citation needs work there. And then you have your verbiage. While there are low-cost options for spaying and neutering, I think what you're talking about there, most people make more money than what falls in the approval bracket to have access to these low cost options. I can't spell. So then that could go there. So I would think that could go. All right. And I would, just for formality and tone, you want to spell out the full thing there. And I would probably I don't know how this is necessary here. Don't forget it's spaying and neutering pets through veterinarian. Okay. And I think you mean I propose. And I would just say start America. Okay. Alright, so that organizationally makes for a better introduction. It by no means would be finished, because with the information that is now, you have a thesis, which is great, and so I would keep that. What's overall missing from here is a sense of, you give us the price of spaying and neutering, and I think some of the other information that I eliminated, which you could bring back in, but it just needs to be presented in a specific way, but it might not be. But what I think you were doing is giving information as to why spaying and neutering is something that should be done. So we would need that evidence with citations like, dog and cat owners should get their pets spayed and neutered because, or they are culturally pressured to do so because, right? It leads to all sorts of these different problems. And then, so it's missing in that. What's missing also is more specificity about what are these low-cost options. Like, I know there are free places to do. My best friend is she's a faculty member at the Daytona Beach campus, and she's the director for PAWS, which is the Embry-Riddle Club that takes care of the cat colony at Daytona Beach, and so they do TNR all the time, which is trap and rescue, which is where they trap the feral cats, go get them spayed and neutered, and then release them into the back into the colonies. So there are those low-cost options. I think we need more information, and it's possible that I can't remember off the top of the head where you talk about what those low cost options look like, but essentially the major question comes down to is, why is $100 to $500 too expensive for the average American with this purported average income of $59,000, which I can't believe that's right, but it feels really high. So that's the ultimate question I think that needs answered in this introduction, is you convincing the reader that $100 to $500 is too much money for the average American to spend on spaying or neutering their pet, which is a very culturally like appropriate thing to do. Like it makes sense, and it like you're considered a quote unquote good pet owner when you do that, because you are, you know, helping decrease populations, and there's, you know, too many cats and dogs out there, et cetera, like all different reasons. So that's kind of what's ultimately missing. And here, okay, so that's all I'm going to say about your intro, because I feel like I might be overwhelming you with a lot of information, but you're my last video to do, so I feel like I'm just going to talk forever. I don't feel like I'm pegged by time, but okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at your first body paragraph. So you start off with families that have, well, essentially this was your second one, and I've turned it into your first body paragraph, but families that have pets and having them neutered or spayed, right, is a great money saving tool, I think, for the local cities and counties that those families live in, right, according to the ASPCA, and then you need to move that quotation to there. To pick up house for 3 days and destroy an animal costs between, is that the right word? That sounds horrible. I don't know if it's from that source. If it is from that source, you need the year there. Double check that quotation. I don't know if that's the right day or right word. Also, when an animal is already spayed neutered, it reduces that cost to save. Here we go. It's confusing because you have your quotations wrong. Half to 2/3 of the original cost. And I'm guessing this is also from the ASPC source, but you'd still need that. I think it was called cost savings. Yeah, that one. I don't know if it's correct, but you would need a citation there. It also helps reduce the unwanted rate. So here you're talking about like why people should spay and neuter. So you need a topic sentence that lets the reader know that they should do that. Right, it's very easy to do. For people who have... Sorry, there is a helicopter circling above because I live in Los Angeles, and my baby parrot, speaking of pets, is squawking right at me. So I apologize if there are ambient noises in this video. For people who have cats and dogs, spaying and neutering are I want to say expected, but that's not, they are, but that's not maybe the right word for this paper. For people who have cats and dogs, spaying and neutering is considered the best option for a variety of reasons. That's all I'm going to say, right? That could be a topic sentence right there. It's not the best topic sentence, but it at least lets the reader know this paragraph is going to be about why spaying and neutering is a good thing. And then you kind of go through that information. So just some polish is needed through here. Reading out loud, again, is always a really good strategy to, you know, see how it's quote unquote flowing from sentence to sentence. And then right here you're missing a okay. And this I don't think is needed. It's just redundant. It's not transitional. All right. has the means to help with this needed reduction in cost. At this point, I'm still like, why is it needed? What? No, sorry, not why is it needed, but why is the reduction in cost needed? So I think more information is needed about, like, information that's like, well, $100 to $500 does not seem like an exceptional amount of money based on a $60,000 a year average, average American income. Even so, like, spaying and neutering it's essential that America, allot more money, like ALLOT, or allocate more money for spaying and neutering, because, despite the fact that people are spaying and neutering, and some numbers on, like, how many people spay and neuter, which we'll never know the exact number. We never know the exact numbers of anything, but, like, there's got to be, like, guesstimates out there. Like, even though, X percentage of dogs and cats are spayed or neutered, spaying and neutering does not solve these problems. So I think more information is needed about that, because there's still that sense of, like, if you're gonna get a cat or dog, like, and you're making an average income of $60,000 a year, you should have no problem paying that cost. So especially if you're a double income household, if you've got two people living in the same household who make $120,000 a year, $100 to $500 is like pittance. So I think it's more about, you need to position the argument more as, like, even though, like, it seems like with the average American income, like, that cost is not necessarily statistically significant, America still needs to allocate more funds for spaying and neutering initiatives, not only for pet owners, but also for people and organizations who do TNR, right? So, sorry, that's trap, neuter, release, is what that stands for. So, and TNR is becoming more and more common. So here, and the other information that you would need is, well, what is the government doing already? Maybe they're not doing anything. I have no idea. But I don't think that, and maybe it's a state by state thing, but I don't think that the federal government, I'm trying to think, I don't know what department would address this, but I don't know. I would be surprised if the federal government was allocating money to this, because it just seems like it would be really low on their list. I don't know if any states are doing anything. Like, if any states are doing it, I doubt that as well. So, I think it's, sorry, I'm just thinking about this where you're getting into kind of where you say, like, even if not at the federal level, it can also be handled at the state and even local, which I think so. This is a little bit informal, but so I think you can just eliminate that. In a city of, and here when you have a number like this, you could just write like that. In a city of 30,000 people, if the city raised its taxes only $2 a year, that would provide, I would say this would provide the city with an extra $60,000 income. That amount of income can help spay and neuter over 1,000 pets. Not just pets, but I would also say like pets in feral colonies. if we can get these costs reduced. So for that, you need to do some math. You've already done some math, but so I'm just thinking about the city, because if we're talking about one city of 30,000 people, which is, a small city, if that $60,000, what will that's a lot of animals, but how many animals? I'm trying to figure out your math here. If it's an extra $60,000, why is it only 1,000 pets? If the cost to spay and neuter is $100 to $500, are you using the median of let's say a high medium of $300 per pet? So you need to give a little bit of information there about how you're coming up with those costs, and if so, what does that look like if the costs are reduced? Like, say, are you saying that if the city had the $60,000 fund for spaying and neutering, people wouldn't have to pay anything? The city would pay for it? If so, that's what you need to say here. So yeah, it would just, sorry, now I'm thinking, my mind is going to the city would be really corrupt to not spend that money on spaying and neutering. But that's not where I wanted this conversation to go. So that just needs some explication here in terms of so I as a pet owner, if I were paying $2 a year in tax, when can I get, because it's also a time, you need to get your animals spayed or neutered at a certain time in their life. At what point can I take my cat or dog to get spayed and neutered? And would I have to pay for it if I were in that city of 30,000 people? So just some more explication is needed there. And you don't need this, because your final paragraph is your call to action, and this is your call to action. You are missing a little bit of conversation about, I've made your paper super short now. But you are missing conversation about, so how this paper should be organized is, that introduction where you introduce the problem, and you're really talking about a monetary problem. So that's why I'm saying there needs to be more information about, why, right now I'm not convinced that with that average American income that $100 to $500 I was paying and neutering. Now, if I had 10 animals, if I was I'm going to go out and adopt every animal at the Humane Society, okay, now I'm talking a lot of money, but the average person doesn't do that. The above average person probably doesn't even do that, but it doesn't seem like an expensive cost, so you have to work more to present it as an actual problem. So that's why I would talk more about why is it a problem? And then, so you have the introduction, and then you need to focus on those potential solutions, so what people are already doing. So you might have a paragraph where you just talk about a potential solution to spaying and neutering have been, certain organizations have, offer these low cost options, and then provide evidence and information about what those low cost options look like. But then talk about why these low cost options, are they not available for everybody? If I went, would I not be able to get my pet spayed or neutered because I make a certain amount of money a year? So more information about that is needed. So talking about the potential solutions, and then the best solution. So just more specificity is needed with all of that. If I talk anymore, I'm just going to repeat myself, so I don't want to talk and make it more confusing if I've made it more confusing. But so this is just overall kind of talking about APA, doing those citations, both the reference page citations and the in-text citations needs work, and then reorganizing your introduction to have a more robust introduction that actually makes the problem justifiably something that needs a solution. Then having it's fine to have a paragraph where you kind of give more information about why it's necessary to spay and neuter, but after that, what you're missing after that is like 1 or 2 paragraphs about potential solutions that have been put in place already to attempt to help the problem, and then move on to your call to action. And then I've given you some feedback on kind of what your call to action needs. So that's everything I've got for you now. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and I look forward to reading the final.